This will be a simple tutorial on the round trip of a photo from Lightroom to Photoshop. There are a lot of things that Lightroom is very capable of doing. There's some things it's absolutely not capable of doing at all, like adding a graphic to an image. So this was the final. I'm going to show you how easy it is to use Photoshop to add something to your image or do some kind of change to your image that only Photoshop can do. And as you can see, it's been cropped and there's been a graphic added. So first thing you want to do is any changes you want to do to the image that are easier to do in Lightroom, go ahead and do that. Anything that's going to affect the whole image, go ahead and do that in Lightroom. So switch over to Develop Module. You can use the hotkey D to do that. This is pretty much good to go, but I'll just show you that, bring the blacks down, brings out the saturation. Kind of want this dramatic effect of these lights to increase a little bit. And then these couple people over here were pretty important, but they don't have the same dramatic lighting as everyone else. So I'm going to bring up my brush by my quick key K, and then I have this pre-made preset that I use for, you can copy it if I have somebody in the shadows that I want to correct. So I've already brushed it on, delete it, and then brush it back on. So I make sure my flow is wherever you want it to be, and I'm going to bring him in. These guys were important to this story as well as the Bible here. So I'm going to make sure that it's emphasized in the final. Okay, that's it. Nothing too dramatic. Now I'm going to open it up in Photoshop. Doing that, I just do right-click, edit in Photoshop. I want to do it with those adjustments I've made. Notice I haven't cropped it at all. I'm going to crop it when I'm done. And I usually work in sRGB, but it's been embedded in Adobe RGB, so that's fine. The final version of this is going to be a web image, so sRGB makes sense. Okay, all I have is my background image. I want to add a logo on top of that, so I'm just going to go over to my logo and simply drop it on. Pretty simple. Okay, there you go. It's been added to on top of the background, and I'm just gonna cheat a little bit, so turn the opacity down just so I can put it in place. I kind of like the effect of it coming up, this guy's arms coming up behind it. So let's shrink it down a little bit, hold the shift key to keep it in perspective. It looks about right to me. So it's in place. I want to get rid of all that blue background, so I'm going to select that color, select color range, and just make sure your fuzziness isn't up too much. If it is, then you're going to select more than you want. So now that color is selected, I want to mask it out. So if I just hit the mask key, I would mask out. It selected that color, so it masked out everything else. So I'm going to undo that, and then I'm going to Option Mask. Then it masks everything else out. I could go and I could have cleaned that a lot, but that's not really the point of this tutorial. I just want to show you how easy it is to do this. So I would like to add something to bring that out a little bit better. It's too much of a varying background there. So I'm just going to add a simple shape in the background. Something like that looks good. And then like it to be feathered quite a bit. That looks good. And then obviously you can bring that behind this. Now I need to edit this so that I can bring the guy out. So I'm just going to merge these two together so that I can put a mask right on top of those. So I'm going to merge those two layers. I selected both of them and right-clicked on them, and then I'm going to create another mask for that object. Zoom in a little bit, and then I'd actually like to make that, and hit V and just change the shape just a little bit. Holding the Shift key down. There we go, that looks good. I'm trying to match it up with those two arms right there. These splashes of water. Okay, now I'm going to zoom in, hitting Command plus on a Mac. I have the mask selected. I hit B, quick key for brush. Use the brackets to make the brush larger. And then I have X switches me between black and white. And then my number keys change my opacity of my brush. So my controls for brushes are X to either mask it or to bring the mask back. The number keys to change opacity. And then the bracket keys to change the brush size. So I need to bring this guy out of here. So I'm going to, with the black color selected, with a low opacity, like a 40%, I'm going to mask this guy, kind of bring him out of that background. And then I notice it's only going to go to 40%. It's not going to go anywhere past that. And it'll go right at 40% because I have 100% flow. Now I want to bring his arm out completely. So I'm going to make my brush smaller. I want to get rid of all that splash on his arm, bring up to opacity 100%. It's going to be a dramatic shift right here. And I could go in and select his arm and make this a little easier, but it's easier to show you just by doing it manually. So I'm using my two fingers on my Mac mouse to reposition the screen. I'm changing my brush size as I go up the arm. I don't really like how that guy's head kind of interferes with his arm, so I'm going to go back and stamp a little bit more brightness on there. Don't worry about that transition here. We're going to feather that in manually. So notice how much easier, even if I was doing something without a graphic, this is than using Lightroom. If you're doing a very detailed selection. So you want to have the effect as if he is in front of this. Again, I could have created a selection from him. If you go over too far, just hit the X key and it brings you back to being able to paint the brush back in. And that's too much. Undo that, 40%. It's not going to go past 40%, which is really nice. Hit X again, so it takes it away. Notice the glare of the light on him right there. I'm going to give myself a little extra space because I'm going to stamp. So notice how it looks like something's happening right here. You can't really tell it's his arm or that this is this person's head. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to extend that glare from the light bulb that was right here on his arm. So it's pretty simple to do. Sounds complicated. Wonderful, wonderful stamp tool in CS6 and now Photoshop CS6 and now Photoshop CC. Make sure you have the right layer selected, which is the background. find where that glare is good. I want to extend it all the way up here, so I need some extra room. I'm going to hold the Alt key down, select that, and then I can see what it would look like if I did stamp it on, which is wonderful about CS6. So I'm going to come on with it and just paint it right on the arm. A little bit more. So now look how his arm, I mean, it looks completely natural. You can't tell I did that. And it brings it out of the background a little bit better. I don't like those two splashes there. I'm going to get rid of those. So come back to the mask, hit B for brush, make it large enough, make sure black is selected as your color, and go ahead and get rid of those two splashes there. I don't really mind this one because it's not interfering with what I'm trying to do. I do want to create more of a feathered look right here, so I'll make my brush a little smaller. I'm going to go to a lower opacity, 20%. It's getting rid of it. I'm just going to manually create a little of a feather here. So 20% is all I'm going to get out of this. Come down to 10%. I'm just kind of naturally feathering that away. And hit X and just brush a little bit on there. Okay, now see, it kind of looks like he's coming out of there. Everything looks good. I'm not going to crop it in Photoshop. I'm going to crop it in Lightroom. I want to do another round trip just to show you what it looks like. I do want to move this guy. He's a friend of mine. He's important to the story. I want to move him here to kind of hide this background. And because that's my final crop is going to be right at this guy's elbow here. He was another integral part of his story here. But I want a round trip to show you. So I'm going to save this, Command S, and it's done saving, so it should be over in Lightroom now. And there's that edit that I just created in Photoshop. It saved it as a TIFF, and you can see now any changes I make to the file in Photoshop will show up back in Lightroom again. But I can go ahead and do more changes to this. I'm going to create my crop where I want it, which is right about there. Crop a little bit out of this right here. Rule of composition, I'd like to get something interesting coming out of the corner. I got this corner grounded here. This corner has a kind of a diagonal line coming out. This corner has a diagonal line coming out. All integral to the story, which is wonderful. And now I can even make changes to this, like let's say I wanted to save some time and I just want to use my brush or my this tool here with quick key Q and just kind of cheat and get rid of these things here. Here I don't like them. So you could heal, you could clone, doesn't really matter there. You can't really tell what's going on down there. It doesn't have to be perfect when it's not drawing much attention. So now I'm going to go back to Photoshop. You won't see those changes have occurred, but the changes I make in Photoshop will come back. So I'm going to move my friend over to here, and when I come back to Lightroom, you'll see it there. So let's go to Photoshop. Notice those two objects are still there. It doesn't matter. When I save this item, that brush will still be, that clone tool, heal tool will still be applied to the final image. So I'm going to move my friend. So some more techniques you got to learn. I'm going to create another layer. Actually, I don't need to create another layer. I'm going to create a selection. I'm going to zoom in over there. Let's select him. You can see some problems based on the shape of the person's head in front of him. We can fix that too. I'm overshooting a little bit of lag. Okay, make my brush a little bigger and just do a selection. Rough selection, no big deal. I need enough of him to hide him behind that banister. Obviously I've done too much, so Alt gets rid of this stuff. And you can see his face isn't perfect yet. Let's zoom in there. I don't want to do this in the Refine Edge tool. It doesn't do a good job when the lines aren't very tight. I want to come in here and just, with a very small brush, select these items that are very minute. There's different tools I could be using for this. A lot of different ways to do selections. If you make the brush larger, whoops, I didn't hit Alt. Undo that. Hit Alt, get rid of that. Make my brush smaller. Get this nose here. Okay, that looks good. Let's get rid of that. The less you have to clean up in Refine Edge, the better, or afterwards. So I'm going to Refine Edge that just to show you some options that you have. Say you didn't like this line here, you can use Refine Edge to kind of help it out. Helps you with, the best thing about this tool is there's something that's very sharp, like a hair, stray hair that's coming out. It'll help with that. Not really applicable here, but I'll show you some issues that this tool can cause later on. So all it's doing is helping you to make a selection. I'm going to copy that selection. And now I'm going to make a new layer. Put it on the new layer. You can't see it yet. I'm going to zoom out. Then I'm going to hit the V tool to pick him up and move him in place. I don't want to have to do another selection to put him behind that guy. So I'm going to put him right in front of him. He's actually kind of a tall guy. So right about there. I don't want to have to make a selection for the guitar either, so I'm going to kind of cheat here and just move him right behind the guitar. Okay. So now what about that banister there? Simple. All I got to do is make a selection for that. Let's hide him. Get my selection tool back out. Select that banister. And now use that as a mask for the object. Okay, if I hit the mask tool again, it's just going to mask that area out. That's not what I want to do. Alt that, or Command Z that. And then if I do the option mask tool, then that's what I want. Now alternatively, I could have just hit the delete key, but then I don't have this wonderful mask that I can go in and make changes to. So now I have this mask tool. You can see I have his shirt is still right here, no problem, because I'm going to hit B for brush. I'm on the mask tool. I have, with X, I'm going to bring up my black, and I'm going to 0 for 100% opacity, and just brush that out. Now notice this line right here isn't clean. I could go in and try to fix that. I'm not going to do that, but I'll show you a couple other things that probably should do, which is the top of his head. It's got a little bit of that white wall still on it, so I'm making a real small mask, real small brush. It's a soft brush with maybe a 50% opacity. I'm just going to kind of brush that away, come up to 70% opacity. And there's actually something behind there, so I'm going to come back and just let that thing be there and not worry about it. Okay, notice where the person's head was, it created this object in the mask that didn't get selected. So I'm going to stamp tool, a lot of grid tools. S is the quick key for stamp. Make a selection with the Alt key. That looks like about the right shape, and it gives me some spare room to work with. Now I bring it down and it shows me what it would look like if I stamped it on. And so with 100% opacity, I'm going to stamp it on. Notice it's not letting me go below this line. Why is that? Because there's a mask there that's keeping that from happening. So now let's, oh, looks like this Bible isn't being shown. I never caught that in the previous one. So I need to B for brush tool, go back to the mask tool, go back to the mask, and hit X to get up my black. And I need to get rid of that. My opacity needs to be 100%. Let's get that Bible back. This gentleman is standing in front of the other gentleman. I could go to this object and make a selection for it, but I'm not going to. It's just as easy to do that. Command Z or Command 0 gets you to full screen. Notice there's two of them, and he's standing there. It looks pretty real. I don't like that black line right there, but I'm not going to worry about it. You don't notice it too much in this large scale. And now the magic is Command S. I save this object, this file. Let's minimize that, and look who pops up right there. Isn't that wonderful? So this is the Lightroom photo with these splashes that were healed out. All my previous edits from Photoshop, and now my current edit from Photoshop with the crop that I had already decided. And now you can, with the item in Lightroom, it's a lot easier to do your slideshows or your books or exporting it from Lightroom than it is from Photoshop, I think. So there you go. That's the round trip from Photoshop to Lightroom. Notice that after that round trip, your previous tone adjustments that you saw before the round trip you don't see them anymore. You've made them. The blacks are a little bit darker than they were. The whites were a little bit brighter, but they don't show up in this version. You could go back and I hit the G button, and you could go back to that file that you previously made, which is right here, and then hit the D button for develop module. This was the file that you used for that other file, and notice those changes were made here. Now if I make changes to this file, it's not going to make changes to my image that I've already created here, because you have to make those changes to this file here. Okay, I hope that was helpful, and you see the value of being able to round trip from Lightroom to Photoshop, and depending on which tool does whatever you'd like it to do, easier or faster, you know which one you need to use. Thank you very much.